Okay, this is in response to a question, really a comment, uh, about the pandemic in Africa of AIDS, and basically the question was, well, why don't they just wear condoms? I've been to the store and they're not that expensive. Well, um, even if expensive were not an incredibly relative idea for somebody in the West or somebody who's white and middle class in South Africa compared to somebody who's in a tribe, Zulu, or one of the poor black people. Uh, Even if it were not for the extreme relativity of that statement, uh, there are plenty of other factors involved. Um, so what I've done is I just went online. I went to Google Scholar, PubMed, and Biomed Central. They're all three matrices for uh, scholarly journals, mostly biological and health information, and it's all open access, so it's free to anybody. So next time you have one of those nagging questions, perhaps some investigation prior to contempt would be in order. So some of the socio-cultural factors that influence preventive strategies and decrease the use of condoms in developing countries include gender inequality in relationships, toleration of male promiscuity, the high value placed on fertility, and patterns of inheritance and land ownership that don't encourage virginity or fidelity for men in relationships. The barriers to practicing safe sex also include a woman's lack of decision-making power. There's a male dislike of condoms, denial of HIV and AIDS altogether. There's an importance placed on building a large family, and they fear the suggestion that condoms will elicit suspicion from somebody's partner and result in social rejection and stigmatization. Women are at a particular disadvantage regarding safe sex as a result of those practices. The gender hierarchies, social cleansing, polygyny, the preference for dry sex, the importance of female fertility and her social cultural reputation, and as a result, women are not in a position to negotiate for condom use. There's also the difficulty that many women face in finding regular employment, which forces them into commercial sex work. Prostitution is a critical risk factor, but it's often a last resort, and it's an economic survival strategy for women struggling to take care of children. Other sociocultural factors include the belief that African men are allowed to be promiscuous and have several sexual partners. The belief that HIV/AIDS is a punishment from God uh, for wrongdoing, and the representation and causes of HIV as part of cultural belief structures may have an effect on sexual behavior choices. Many cultures in sub-Saharan Africa believe that STDs, AIDS, are caused by witchcraft or sorcery. So safe sex is neither necessary nor perceived as appropriate protection for HIV/AIDS. In addition, the exchange of bodily fluids is seen as mystical rather than physical, and then the relationship between practicing safe sex and HIV/AIDS is weakened further. There's also purification rituals that increase the risk of HIV infection. They include practices such as bloodletting and ejaculation. Also, Western biomedical messages about prevention in terms of practicing safe sex and or abstinence challenges one of the central cultural beliefs of traditional African cultures that focuses on the life-enhancing forces that are conveyed through fertility and the opportunity for sexual release. Some of the sociocultural practices that can be seen as vehicles for HIV transmission or things like circumcision, religious institutions that promote engaging in sex without condoms, and traditional healers who give men instructions to sleep with young girls who are virgins in order to cure their own HIV. The perceived attitude of the people in South Africa, especially most of the studies that I was able to find are from South Africa. The problem there is most rampant, and so the information is most available. They asked many girls what their attitude was toward condoms, whether they used them, and why or why not. I've got some examples of some reactions one Zulu woman said of her boyfriend, "I would be afraid of his reaction. He might leave me." The male opposition to contraceptives is common. A study from Soweto, Umazi, and Kayashlita found that fear of losing a partner was the most important barrier to women's contraceptive use. There's also a fear that rejection will lead to violence. Uh, One woman said, "I would not talk to my boyfriend about contraception. If he thought I was using it, he would beat me." In many religious communities, the condom is associated with immoral or social or sinful behavior. There are some examples of how the church has represented condoms, not just the Catholic Church, Anglican as well. There's one sermon given at the Youth Congress of the Anglican Church: "We are saved by the blood of the Lamb, not by a piece of rubber." Um, the president of the Vatican's Pontifical Council for the Family made the following statement on Catholic Online, suggesting that condoms should carry a government health warning. The AIDS virus is roughly 450 times smaller than spermatozoon. The sperm can easily pass through the net formed by the condom. These margins of uncertainty should represent an obligation on the part of the health ministries and all these campaigns to act in the same way as they do with regard to cigarettes, which they state to be a danger. There's one rally organized by a faith-based organization in Uganda. Participants were told that using a condom with a person with these sexually transmitted diseases is like putting a parachute which only opens 75% of the time. Be wise and don't condomize, was the message from a Catholic publication in Nairobi, in Kenya. Using or not using a condom is not simply a question of safer sexual behavior. It is the outcome of a negotiation between potentially unequal partners. Condoms are not neutral objects about which a straightforward decision can be made on health grounds. Sexual encounters may be sites of struggle and about the acceptance or rejection of male power. Male definitions of sexuality and women's ambivalence and resistance come heavily into play. A key problem is that the condom message itself calls upon a woman to assert dominance in the sexual act, and almost everywhere such dominance is not their traditional role and imposes unfamiliar behavior on both members of the couple. Condom use increases when power is shared more equitably in the relationship and decreases when women have little power or control. Adolescent girls in KwaZulu, Natal, used a condom when this was initiated by a man but felt it would be easier to refuse sex completely than to negotiate condom use themselves. Decisions to use condoms are controlled by males with a tacit agreement with their female partners. Gender-based inequalities generally incorporate a belief that men should control women's sexuality and childbearing capacity. Concerns expressed by men include the fear they will lose their role as head of the family. It's about relationships of unequal power, where the woman has no power to negotiate. That's a partial explanation. There's an awful lot more that can be found, as I said, for free. I'll include the web addresses to Biomed Central, to PubMed, Google Scholar. You ought to be able to find. Um, Beyond that, I suppose I would say to anyone who takes a stance of judgment toward anyone with